How you doing? My name's Sergeant Delaney. I have a speech, oral brief on the creed of the non-commissioned officer. The purpose of this brief is to let everyone have a little bit more insight on the history of the creed of the non-commissioned officer. The risk assessment is fire in the front, we're next to the back. Fire in the back, we're next to the front. In case of inclement weather, we're going to meet up in the center of the building and stay there and get accountability. Active shooter, we've been through the same thing. Meet in the center of the building, take accountability. It is the responsibility of all DA civilians and uniformed personnel to prevent the environment from harm. The earliest I can date the NCO creed back is 1973, where Sergeant First Class Earl Burnham and Jimmy Jakes recall writing on a piece of paper the 3 letters NCO. They left it on the sheet in front of a committee, the NCO Subcommittee of Command and Leadership Committee. They just left it on the table, and from there, that's where everyone, the whole committee, wanted to define what an NCO is. It was a point of turmoil for all the NCOs and the whole Army, because it was right after the Vietnam War. The idea of the development of the NCO creed was to give NCOs a measuring stick of how they can measure themselves compared to other soldiers. When it was ultimately approved, the NCO creed was printed on the inside cover of all special textbooks issued to students at Fort Benning, Georgia in 1974. Even though it was printed on that book in 1974, it took about 11 years for it to actually get approval from the Army, to get approval for Army-wide distribution. It was familiarized the Army publication 11 years later. Though it was written in different ways, the NCO creed still begins with each paragraph still begins with those 3 letters, NCO. Each letter starts that paragraph. It continues after all these years to guide and reinforce the values of all generations of NCOs. There's a few key sentences I think that are very important, and my personal favorite sentence in the creed of non-commissioned officers: I will always place the needs of my soldiers above my own. We've all been in the military for a decent amount of time now, and I can almost guarantee that every single one of you met an NCO that hasn't done that hasn't put their needs of their soldiers above theirs. And I think that is the purpose of this class, is to learn how to correctly become a leader. The different versions of the creed of non-commissioned officer is, they're not very different. There have been 3 that I've seen in the past few days, and they all span about 2 years apart. They just changed a few words here and there. And finally, I think we found where we are. There's been a big controversy, I guess you can say, about the words tactically and technically. When I learned the NCO creed, it was technically and tactically, but the correct way is technically and technically. And I think it is very important that we all get on the same page. In closing, I just want to say that this is just a short glimpse of the history of the NCO creed, and it's very important that we all study it a little bit more and actually know what it means. We say it every day in class, multiple times a day, but how many of us actually take the time and actually know what it means to become a non-commissioned officer? At this time, I'll take questions. Any questions? That concludes my brief on the history of non-commissioned officers.